here's what could happen, right? This is what potentially worries me. The price of Bitcoin now will actually go down because people are worried that MicroStrategy might have to sell their Bitcoin. Now, people start worrying that MicroStrategy is going to pose a systemic risk to the entire system, which is then going to create more of a vicious cycle on the downside. They may say, you know what, I have Bitcoin, but I want to support other types of things. And maybe I won't call it diversify, but they want to have a little fun, right? Mm-hmm. They might want to say, I'm going to speculate a little bit with 10% of my Bitcoin, or maybe even 30% of my Bitcoin, right? If MicroStrategy gets too big, I could potentially see a danger on the way down.
If Michael Saylor's strategy collapses, Bitcoin could take a hit. But the real danger is the panic it could trigger. A sell-off fueled by fear could create a vicious cycle that shakes the entire market. That's the latest warning from Wall Street veteran and mathematician Fred Krueger. Strategy's aggressive Bitcoin investments has turned it into a giant in the space. But that kind of leverage comes with serious risks. If a deep bear market hits and their debt piles up, panic could set in. Investors holding MSTR might dump their shares first, fearing margin calls or forced Bitcoin sales. If that happens, Bitcoin itself could take a massive hit, not because of its fundamentals, but because of fear that the company might be forced to liquidate. Make sure to stick around until the end of the video as Fred Krueger breaks down the risks, the opportunities, and what's really coming next for Bitcoin. Also guys, if you want to stay most up to date on the crypto world, I send out a daily 5-minute crypto newsletter that covers expert predictions, on-chain data breakdowns, and breaking news, all for free. Click the first link in the description, enter your email, and join 50,000 plus others to become a better crypto investor right now. Now, here's Fred Krueger with insights you don't want to miss.
But if the price drops, you have to put more Bitcoin on, right?
Yeah.
Right? Otherwise, you have to repay the loan. You know, those are your choices. I'm just saying, all of a sudden you can get into a world of pain, right?
Yeah.
With these, you know. Now, again, when does that happen? That happens in a bear market. In a bear market, do you really like having $5 billion of debt in a bear market? No, that's usually what kind of destroys you. When we do have the next bear market, and I don't know what will drive it. I don't know. I don't especially know if we can predict when it's going to be, right? And but I think in that bear market, what are people going to sell first? MSTR or the Bitcoin that they have in cold storage?
MSTR.
Right. They're going to sell MSTR, right? So if they're sitting on MSTR and MSTR is trading in a multiple of 3 or 4 or even 2, they're going to be like, well, I'm going to get rid of this first, right? It's like it's run by Saylor. He might get some liquidated. He might have some margin calls, whatever. You know, if I got my Bitcoin in cold storage, well, that I know. 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin. Great. Like if we get into a complete bear market, right? There's not going to be any new convertible bond offerings. There won't. Those things will be on ice. Okay. And do you think they're going to be selling more stock? No, they will not. They will not be selling stock at 1 times multiple or 0.9 times a multiple. Here's the problem there. Okay, they could sell bonds. Yes, they could sell bonds similar to the bonds that they sold their first batch of bonds, right? If you remember, those bonds were at a 9% yield or so, 6% yield initially.
This was in 2020.
They would be in. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Those were like actual Bitcoin-backed bonds. They actually had to segment out, say this Bitcoin is going to be used as collateral for those bonds, right? Very, very tricky, which is one of the reasons they quickly paid off those bonds, right? They did not want to have that stuff sitting on their balance sheet. Would they do that? Yes, they could do that, right? They could definitely say, listen, we got all this Bitcoin. We're not going to sell this Bitcoin, right? But we're going to take, I don't know, let's take 100,000 Bitcoin that they have, right? And then we're going to pledge that Bitcoin and we're going to borrow some money against that Bitcoin, right? And what would the interest rate there be? Would it be 1%? Absolutely not. Okay. That Bitcoin is going to, that loan is going to be a 6% loan. Okay. It will, I mean, In today's environment, it'd be a 9% loan, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, and it would be collateralized by the Bitcoin. So are they going to issue a convertible bond? Nope, they're not going to do it if their stock is trading and we're in the depths of a bear market. They're not issuing convertible bonds. They're issuing bonds against Bitcoin, high coupon. They're going to tie up Bitcoin, and everybody's going to start worrying about those bonds, triggering some redemption clause, right? What they can say is that they need to have a certain amount of collateral, otherwise they need to sell, right? They sort of say, this loan is backed by these Bitcoin. This is what potentially worries me, is we add so much convertible debt to this thing. Let's suppose we get to $30 billion of convertible debt, okay? Let's say, right? And now all of a sudden we hit a really bad bear market. Now people start worrying that MicroStrategy is going to pose a systemic risk to the entire system.
Okay.
And they're going to start, the price of Bitcoin now will actually go down because people are worried that MicroStrategy might have to sell their Bitcoin. Which is then going to create more of a vicious cycle on the downside.
Despite reporting a $670 million loss in Q4 2024, Strategy's stock is up 370% in the past year, and analysts see potential for it to be part of the S&P 500. The company now holds 478,740 BTC, worth over $46 billion. Having added 258,320 BTC in 2024 alone. To fund even more purchases, it rolled out a $2 billion debt offering with 0% interest, doubling down despite Bitcoin's price swings. With major institutions paying close attention, Strategy's bold Bitcoin decisions are keeping the market on edge. Now let's go back to Fred Krueger as he discusses further.
Does that mean it's a systemic danger long-term for Bitcoin? No. But it just could mean we get into a really bad bear market for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And one of the casualties of that bear market might be MSTR, right? It might be, right? So there's definitely some scenario where MSTR goes bust. Okay, in my opinion, that's not zero, right? The way. So I don't think it's going to be, again, none of this stuff's catastrophic for Bitcoin. And, 20 years from now,
everything is good for Bitcoin. At the end of the day, if MicroStrategy...
Ultimately, it's all good for Bitcoin, but I'm just saying...
Yeah.
I think if you were looking at this thing from a personal point of view, I really think there's two ways you can look at this. First of all is, you're one of the many people in the world who can't buy Bitcoin. Okay, and I put a tweet out today because I just was like, okay, if you can't buy Bitcoin, but you can buy MSTR, raise your hand. And I had people like, well, I live in Norway. I can't buy Bitcoin. I live in the UK. I can't buy Bitcoin. I live in Saudi Arabia. I can't buy Bitcoin. I live in Sweden. I can't buy Bitcoin. I'm a client of Vanguard. I can't buy Bitcoin. So there's all these people out there who just can't buy the ETF, right? And many people in Europe, they just can't even buy physical Bitcoin. It's just too hard, right? So there's a whole class of people for which, if they want exposure to this general asset class, MSTR is one of very few ways that they can easily participate, right? If you're in the UK and your main source of money is in your pension fund or something, and the only way to have access to this is to buy MSTR, right? That's your only choice, right? You're in a different category than Rajat sitting in Toronto, and you can buy actual Bitcoin if you want. So I think that there are sort of two kinds of people. One is people who just can't buy anything else and have to buy MSTR. They're sort of trapped into liking it or not. Now, whether it's an asset that delivers more Bitcoin every year, it has a Bitcoin yield, I get all that, right?
Yeah.
But that's one class of people. The other class of people is people who have Bitcoin and, they may say, you know what, I have Bitcoin, but I want to support other types of things. Maybe I won't call it diversify, but they want to have a little fun, right? They might want to say, I'm going to speculate a little bit with 10% of my Bitcoin, or maybe even 30% of my Bitcoin, right? I was one of those guys, right?
Yeah.
I bought calls on MSTR. I did really well with my calls on MSTR, okay? But do I see a massive need to buy MSTR at 3 times the amount of Bitcoin, even if they're producing a Bitcoin yield? No, I don't. If you look at the log price of Bitcoin, right, the log of Bitcoin price, and you average the logs over 4 years, you'll see that that's just a complete straight line, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think that the chance of us deviating from that behavior in the next 4 years is very low, right? I don't think if something fits a straight line with 99% R squared, you know, that you're going to see that line break in 4 years, you know.
Strategy's approach has made it a go-to investment for those who can't buy Bitcoin directly, but that reliance comes with risks. If Bitcoin enters a brutal bear market, MSTR could be one of its biggest casualties. Despite these risks, Bitcoin's long-term trajectory remains unchanged. As Kruger pointed out, mathematical data shows Bitcoin following a consistent growth pattern over the years, driven by supply dynamics and increasing adoption. Strategy might eventually fall, but Bitcoin keeps marching forward. Those who survive this market will be the ones holding the real thing, not relying on someone else's leverage. Now, don't forget, if you want guidance through the exciting but sometimes unpredictable world of cryptocurrency, our daily 5-minute crypto newsletter is here to help. Don't pass up the chance to stay updated and make informed choices in the crypto market. The link is in the description below. Anyway, guys, hope you all enjoyed today's video and that it provided you with some value. I'll see you all in the next one, and as always, all the best.